Good morning, boys and girls. This is Miss Clark again, and we're going to do some more lessons on telling time. I know that last time, no pun intended, we did telling time to the hour and the half hour. Today we're going to talk about telling time to the quarter hour, 5 minutes, and the difference between AM and PM. Let's get started. All right, boys and girls, so we're going to do a quick review of our clock. So as you remember, this is our clock. It has a face and 2 hands like you have. This is the hour hand. Remember that the hour hand is shorter, like the word hour is shorter than minute. And the blue hand is the minute hand. It's longer. So what time is this clock showing right now? If you said 4 o'clock, good job. The minute hand is pointing directly to the 12 and the hour hand is pointing directly to the 4. If you remember, last time we used our colorful clocks to talk about when our hand is in the room that the number is, that's the hour. So if we move our minute hand down to 30, we can see that even though the hour hand isn't pointing directly at the 4, it's still in the 4 room. So we know that this clock is showing 4:30. Well, today we're going to talk about to the quarter hour. So this is half past. If I move my minute hand all the way up, now this clock is showing 5 o'clock. So remember how I told you how these little numbers on the outside here were going to be important? Well, today we're going to talk about those little numbers. So if you think about a clock, remember I told you it can be cut in half. So when the minute hand is pointing to the 6, that is to the half hour. Remember, a full hour is 60 minutes. So half of that would be 30. Well, if we cut our clock into 4 pieces this time, that would be to the quarter. So if I make a little line here, make a little line down here, a little line down here, and a little line across here. So we'll cut our clock into 4 quarters. If we count these little numbers, 5, 10, 15, put my minute hand on the 3. Now the time is showing quarter after 5. Because even though our hour hand is not pointing directly to the 5, if we look at our colorful clock, we know that that hour hand is still in the 5's house. So our minute hand has moved 1/4 of the way around our clock. So we can read this time as quarter after 5 or 5:15. So then we'll move our hand another quarter, and now we are halfway around our clock. So now the time is, you guessed it, 5:30, but you already knew that one, we learned it last time. All right, now's where it's gonna get a little tricky, but I know you're gonna get it. Let's move our minute hand another quarter around our clock. And that way it will be pointing directly to the 9. If we look, we can see that our little number over here says 45. That means that the time on our clock is now showing 5:45. We can read this as 5:45 or 5:45. I know that's a little confusing, but we're going to talk about that in a minute. If you look here, it's pretty tricky, and this is where your colorful clock is really going to come in handy, because this can look like it's on the 6, but it's not quite. If we draw this on our colorful clock, you'll see that the hour hand is here, and the minute hand is pointing directly to our 9. Our hour hand is still in the 5 room, just barely, but it is still in that 5 room, and that is how we know that the time is 5:45. The reason we can also say 5:45 is because we have 1/4 of our clock left to go until it is 6 o'clock. So watch. If I move our minute hand this last quarter, it is now 6 o'clock. So that's why we can say 5:45. And I know that can be a little tricky, but sometimes you'll hear grown-ups say that. So I want you to know what that means if you hear a grown-up say that. All right, boys and girls. So if you have your math book, it's the skinny math book, I want you to take out pages 613. And remember, if you don't have this, there will be a link posted right above this video, and you can click on it and you can look at these very same pages while I'm doing this lesson. So, this shows us even better our clock split into those 4 quarters. It's kind of like a pizza cut into 4 pretty big slices, right? So if I want to show you 4:15, I'm going to draw my hour hand pointing a little past the 4, and then my minute hand is going to be right on that 3. It's going to follow one of those big pizza slice lines, okay? And if it helps you, you can draw those little numbers around the outside to help you remember that this is going to read 4:15 or 4:15. Okay. All right, so now you can turn the page to page 614, and again, this is in the link right above this video if you don't have your book at home. You can show time to the quarter hour. There are 15 minutes in a quarter hour. There are 4 quarter hours in an hour. So let's look at this purple clock first. And remember, this is an analog clock and this is a digital clock. So let's read the time on the analog clock. The analog clock is showing 1 o'clock, which we knew that one. That one's pretty easy peasy, right? Now, when our minute hand, the big hand, moves 1/4 of the way around our analog clock, that means that it is now showing 1:15 as our time. Because remember, 1/4 of the way around the clock is 15 minutes. Let's look at our green analog clock. When our minute hand has moved halfway around our analog clock, the time is now showing 1:30 or 1:30. Remember, it is 1:30 because our minute hand has now moved 30 minutes past 1 o'clock. Now here's our last one. When our minute hand moves 3/4 of the way around our clock and is pointing at the 9, remember our hour hand is almost set to almost. Our clock is now showing 1:45 or 1:45 because that minute hand has moved 45 minutes past 1 o'clock. All right, so let's look down here and do some examples. Let's look at our yellow analog clock. Our hour hand is just a little bit past the 11, and our minute hand is pointing directly at the 3. Now remember, if you're having a little trouble figuring out what the hour is, draw your lines from your colorful clock and pull out that colorful clock to help you see even better what it's pointing to. So you can draw it on the colorful clock if you need to. What time is the yellow analog clock showing? If you said 11:15, amazing job. You are getting very good at this already. All right, it's going to get a little trickier now, but you should know this one. We learned this last time. Let's look at our blue analog clock. Our hour hand is between the 8 and 9. And our minute hand is pointing directly to the 6. And I know you should get this one like that because we did this last time. What time is this clock showing? 8:30. Awesome. Because our minute hand has moved halfway around our clock, which is 30 minutes. All right, here we go. Let's try this one. Now this one might be really when you need your colorful clock, and that's totally fine. And whatever helps you, that's a great way to help you learn. So let's draw our lines. And as you can see, our hour hand is almost so close to that 7. Our minute hand has moved 3/4 of the way around our clock and is pointing directly at our 9. Now again, if it helps you, let's draw this on our colorful clock. We'll put our minute hand directly on that 9, and our hour hand was almost to the 7. But as you can see, the hour hand is still in that 6 room. So we know that our hour is going to read 6. And again, if we look at those numbers around the outside of our clock, we know that it is 6:45 or 6:45, because remember we have 1/4 of our clock left until it's 7. All right, so let's turn to page 615 in our book. And again, if you don't have this, remember it's in that link right above this video. So let's look at our green analog clock here. What time is our analog clock showing? Now remember, pay attention, our hour hand is just past that 4 and our minute hand is on the 3. What time is this clock showing? If you said 4:15, you're amazing. This clock is showing 4:15 or 4:15. Okay, boys and girls, so let's look at this red clock. Now this is where it can get a little tricky, but this is where your colorful clock is really going to help you. So I want you to take what you see here, and you can draw your lines if you have to, and then draw it onto your colorful clock to really help you. So let's draw our minute hand pointing at the 9. And then if we look at our red clock, that hour hand is between the 7 and the 8, almost to the 8. So let's draw it almost to the 8, not quite on the 8. So if we look at our colorful clock, we can see that even though it's sneaking up on that 8 right there, it is still in the 7's room. So we know that our hour is 7 and our minutes are going to be 45. So we can tell that this clock is showing 7:45 or 7:45. And if 7:45 is still a little tricky for you, that's okay. It will come with practice. But I just want you to hear that because it is something that you will hear people say. And 7:45, remember, just means that we have 1/4 until it gets to the next hour. So let's look at our last green clock right here and tell me what time this clock is showing. Remember, draw your lines if you have to. If you said that this clock is showing 2:15, you did a great job. That is exactly what time this clock is showing. The hour hand is just past our 2 and our minute hand is pointing directly to our 3. And remember, that's 5, 10, 15, 1/4 after. All right, this is where you're going to get to draw the hands yourself. So, 1/4 Now remember, I know that sounds tricky, but remember, 1/4 means we have 1/4 left of the clock until it's 2 o'clock. It's not 2 o'clock yet, it's almost 2 o'clock. So if it's not 2 o'clock yet, then that means that our hour hand is still in that 1's house, right? Our hour hand is still in that 1's house. not quite on the 2 yet, and our minute hand is going to be pointing directly on that 9 for 45. And this is how we show quarter till 2, also known as 1:45. Quarter past 5. Now we already have our minute hand showing us 1/4 past. Now we just have to draw that hour hand. And remember, when it's quarter past 5, our hour hand is only going to be a smidgen past 5 o'clock, right? So past the 5. So now this clock is showing quarter past 5 or 5:15. All right, let's do one last one. Now you have to draw both hands to show quarter past 12. Show me quarter past 12 on your clock. Let's draw the minute hand first because we know that quarter past means that it's going to be directly on our 3. And quarter past 12 means that our hour hand is just going to be a smidgen past 12. And on our digital clock, it will say 12:15. All right, boys and girls, so now we're going to talk about time to 5-minute intervals. And that's kind of just a really fancy way of saying time to 5 minutes. So remember how I told you, pay attention to these little numbers around the outside of your clock, that they were going to eventually be pretty important. Well, now is when they're going to be really important because they're really going to help you understand time to 5-minute intervals. So look here. As you can see, this says 5. Then we see a 10. Then we see 15 and 20 and 25 and 30 and so on. Did you notice a pattern? If you said we're counting by 5s, you're absolutely correct. We are counting by 5s. If you notice, each of these numbers is next to one of our big numbers on our clock. So each of these little sections is going to be 5 minutes. Now remember, we talked about how a whole hour is 60 minutes, and that's why it shows 60 up here. But also remember, when you're telling time to the hour, that another way to write it, when you see the 12, is 0, 0. So, think about it as 0, 0 when we're doing this lesson. So, we're starting at 0, and then we're going to go to 5. And then when we go to another number, that's another 5 minutes. So our minutes are going to read 10, and then 15, and then 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and remember we put the little dots, 45, 50, 55, and then back to 00 when it's o'clock. Now we put the little dots because that way when we write our hour in front of it, we know that those are the minutes. So let's try one. Right now my clock is showing what time? 5 o'clock. Very good. So when my minute hand moves to the 1, that means it has moved 5 minutes. And this clock now reads 5:05. That means it is 5 minutes past 5 o'clock. When my minute hand moves to the 2, and remember this is the minute hand, when the minute hand moves to the 2, it has gone 10 minutes past 5 o'clock, past the hour. So now my time reads 5:10. Now we already learned in our last lesson when the minute hand is pointing to the 3, it's gone a quarter past. So we know that our time here is 5:15 or quarter past 5. Let's do 2 more. Let's move another 5 minutes. And now our minute hand is pointing to the 4. which means we have gone 20 minutes past 5, so our time is now 5:20. Let's move 5 more minutes, and now our time is 5:25. And then when our minute hand gets down to the 6, you know what time it is. We've learned that a bunch of times now. And that means that it is now 5:30 or 5:30. Now, you can keep going around your clock and doing this and keep practicing, because eventually you'll see that when it goes all the way around, we will get to 6 o'clock. Okay, boys and girls, so if you have your math book, open up to page 619. And remember, if you don't have your math book at home, that's okay, because the link to these pages is right above this video. So just click on that link and you can follow along on these pages. So let's take a look at this lesson. And remember, our lesson is time to 5-minute intervals, and that's a fancy way of saying time to 5 minutes. So we already kind of did this, but I'm sure you love skip counting, so we'll do it again. When we count around our clock, we skip count by 5s. So remember, we start at 00 for o'clock. When we get to the 1, 5, and remember to put that 0 in front of the 5 because that's important when we're writing our time on a digital clock or reading time on a digital clock. 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, which we know because that's half past, 35, 40, let's keep going, 45, 50, and 55 will be our 11. And remember, 60 would be 12, and it is because 1 full hour is 60 minutes. But we keep that 00 there so we know when we write our minutes, that's what it's going to say for o'clock. So let's practice. Let's draw our minute hand pointing to our 8. Now, what time is this clock showing? And draw your lines so you can see what house it's in, and look at your colorful clock if you need to. It's between the 5 and the 6, which means it's still in the 5 room. So this clock is showing 5:40 because when we skip count it around, we're on the 8, and that is 40 minutes past 5 o'clock. So 5:40. Okay, so now we're on page 620 in our books. It takes 5 minutes for the minute hand to move to the next number. You can skip count by 5s to tell the time. This clock shows 40 minutes after 9 o'clock. Let's write that time another way. So right here, our hour hand is almost on that 10, but it is still in the 9 room, and our minute hand is pointing to the 8, which is 40 minutes past 9. So we can also write the time as 9:40. Now the helpful hint that our book is giving you is that each little mark on our clock is 1 minute. And let me show you that on our tiny clock. So each of these little lines is 1 minute. So if we start at 5, we can see that if we go 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, if you want to practice with that, once you get really good at time to the 5 minutes, that's fine. And I'm sure maybe you have older brothers or sisters or mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or aunts, uncles, somebody who can help you with that. But for right now, we're just going to practice time to the 5 minutes. I just wanted to show you that in case you were wondering what all those little lines on your clock mean. So let's do some practice down here. with telling time on some analog and then writing it onto a digital clock. So let's look at our green clock here. Our hour hand is just past our 12, and our minute hand is pointing to the 4. Well, let's skip count around. Start at the 1 is 5, right? 0, 5, 10, 15, 20. If you said that the time on this clock is 12:20, good job. That is exactly what time this clock is showing. All right, now this is going to be a tricky one, and if the yellow weren't here, it would be pretty hard to tell. So let's pull out our colorful clocks, because since our minute hand is so close to being our next O clock, that hour hand is pretty hard to tell where it's at right now. And your eyes might be trying to trick you a little bit. So the easiest way to do this is to write it on our colorful clock. So we can see our minute hand is pointing right at our 11, and our hour hand is almost so close to that 4. So close to that 4, but not quite. We can still see a little bit of pink there, which means that it is still in the 3 room. So this clock is showing 3:55. This clock is showing 3:55. We have gone 55 minutes past 3 o'clock, but we're not at 4 o'clock yet. All right, let's do this red clock now. Our hour hand is between the 4 and the 5, and the minute hand is pointing at the 5. Let's see, so our hour, we know, is in the 4 room, right? So we know our hour is 4, and then if we skip count around, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. This clock is showing 4:25. Down here, it is asking us to tell what time is shown and draw the minute hand to show the time. Well, on our digital clock, we can see that it is showing 10:35. What number is my minute hand going to point to show 35? If you said the 7, you are awesome. If we skip count around, we know 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35 minutes past, we'll have our minute hand pointing directly to our 7. All right, boys and girls, so now we're on page 621, and we're just going to do a couple on this page because I want you to be able to practice those other ones on your own at home. So let's look at our first green clock here. What time is the analog clock showing? I want you to read the analog clock and then write it on the digital clock. If you said 3:50, you are correct. And remember, I know it's a little tricky because that hour hand is so close to that 4. But if you pulled out your colorful clock and drew it on there, that will really help you to see that that hour hand is still in that 3 room. And when you skip count it around, you know that the minute hand is pointing to the 10, which is 50 minutes past 3. Let's jump down here to this section and let's read our digital clock and draw our hands on our analog clock. Let's try doing the purple one. This digital clock is showing 12:35. Can you please draw the hands on your clock to show 12:35? Remember, the hour hand is shorter and the minute hand is the longer hand. If you drew something that looked like this, where the hour hand was between the 12 and 1, and your minute hand is directly on the 7, good job. This clock is showing 12:35. All right, let's do one more right down here in this section. Let's stick with purple and do this purple one. The time they would like us to show is 2:20. Please draw the hands on your clock to show 2:20. Remember, the hour hand is shorter and the minute hand is longer. If you drew your hour hand between the 2 and 3 a little bit there, and your minute hand on the 4, you are absolutely correct. This clock is now showing 2:20 or 20 minutes after 2.